My next guest used to work with Steve Bannon at the conservative news website Breitbart that has generally supported President Trump and the administration. For more, I want to bring in Joel Pollack. He's the senior editor-at-large for Breitbart News. Joel, thanks very much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Joel, about an hour ago, you tweeted out #war. What was that about?
#war has been our motto since the days of Andrew Breitbart. And we use it whenever we go to war against our three main targets, which are, in order, Hollywood and the mainstream media, number one, the Democratic Party and the institutional left, number two, and the Republican establishment in Washington, number three. And I tweeted that to let our readers know that our mission remains the same, as it has been before Trump, as it was when Trump was elected, and as it will continue to be through the Trump administration and beyond. We remain true to our mission, and we are happy warriors. We fight onward. All
right. So I appreciate, since the mainstream media is one of the targets, that you're here with me today, because I want to have a sort of a constructive discussion with you about what your constituency, what we need to know about your constituency. But let's just stick on this for a second. Is there an implication here that there is going to be a war that involves Steve Bannon versus the Trump administration?
I don't know. It really depends on the Trump administration. The key to the administration's success has been and will continue to be whether it sticks to the agenda on which Donald Trump ran for president. And in many ways, he has indeed stuck to that agenda since taking office in January. And the issues are what bind him to his base. It's not personalities. It's not even Steve Bannon. It is his performance on those issues. And those are issues that our readers generally want to see action on. They include Obamacare and tax reform, but they also include things like the Paris Climate Accords, which Trump did withdraw from, apparently with advice from Steve Bannon. It includes the renegotiation of NAFTA and other priorities that Trump made essential, such as the border wall. So these are all things that if Trump makes progress on, he will continue probably to see positive coverage from Breitbart and from other conservative news websites and from talk radio. But if he veers away, if he pulls an Arnold Schwarzenegger and tries to reinvent himself as a liberal, he will see that support erode very, very quickly, and he will struggle politically, I think, to make the case for re-election in 2020.
Joel, I just want to bring our viewers a response now that Breitbart has issued. We'll just put it up on the screen, and I'll read it. Breitbart's comments are, "You blew it, Mr. Trump. We didn't vote for globalists and elitists in the GOP, and we don't need your son-in-law either." I don't know if you had anything to do with that, but I'll continue reading it. It says, "Well, Trump has now lost Ann Coulter and me. I didn't vote for Jeb Bush, but apparently that is what I got." I'm sorry, that was a comment that was from a Breitbart reader commenting on the story that Steve Bannon is out of the White House. Okay, so first of all, Gabe Sherman is reporting that a source close to Steve Bannon says that Steve Bannon is returning to Breitbart. Is that something you can confirm for us?
I don't know anything about it and couldn't comment on it if I did.
All right. Let's talk about the people who are your constituency, your readers. Steve Bannon has said in the past that Breitbart is a platform. In fact, his quote, he told Mother Jones, "Breitbart is a platform for the alt-right." Is that true?
No, it isn't true. Certainly not the way that people understand the alt-right today. In fact, there's an excellent article in the New York Times Magazine this weekend that talks about Breitbart and specifically our editor-in-chief, Alex Marlow, but along the way also interviews Yochai Benkler, who's a researcher at Harvard, who has done research about how the alt-right actually works in social media. And he says to the New York Times that his conclusion is that Breitbart is not alt-right. And that's certainly how we feel at Breitbart. We are not an alt-right website. We don't have alt-right writers or editors. But I think what happened during the election campaign was that there were a significant number of readers from the alt-right world who were looking for positive coverage of Donald Trump. And we were virtually the only conservative news website that didn't turn into a never Trump site. So we were giving positive coverage. We also had criticism. I personally wrote some critical articles about some of his policies. For example, Muslim ban, I said at the time, was a stupid idea. A couple other things as well. So we were critical, but generally supportive. And I think that's a reason that people started reading Breitbart. So I think that's what Steve was referring to. But we are not a platform in the sense, and certainly not the way people are using the term today, which is to include these Nazis and white supremacists and all these really deplorable people.
So
I can use that phrase in its appropriate context.
You're comfortable.
These really odious people who are out there in Charlottesville.
Well, I guess, okay, you've answered it then. You're comfortable disavowing neo-Nazis and KKK and white supremacists and people who, that group that we're calling the alt-right.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no room for them on our website and never will be.
Okay, so let's then understand who your constituency is. How would you describe them? And I mean this very sincerely, because before we descend into a race war, I think important dialogue is useful. So what is the message? What is the thing that your constituents and your readers would like my viewers to understand?
Most of our readers are people just like your viewers. They're Americans who are tired of the way the political system has failed, not just for the 8 years of Barack Obama, but has failed for decades. We've seen a political system that's increasingly unresponsive to the needs of Americans, that's spending much more money than it takes in, that is making rash decisions on grand scales, whether it's going to war without a proper plan or redesigning the entire healthcare system while lying to people about how much it's going to cost and what it's going to do to their doctor and their insurance policy. People are sick of the way Washington works. And Breitbart also includes a large number of people who are self-identified conservatives who have particular beliefs about the ways in which that crisis of governance should be addressed. I am a constitutional conservative myself, and there are many in our audience who believe that a return to the basic vision of limited government in our Constitution is the way to address that problem. We also have other people who have a more populist view, who believe that government has some interventionist role to play in people's lives, and that's a view I think that Steve Bannon represents that can fit with the constitutional conservative view, and so we have some tension and interplay on our website and in our audience with that. But essentially, there's actually not that much difference between readers of Breitbart and readers of the Huffington Post in terms of their frustration with the elite media. There is, I think, a commonality also of interest in opposition media. I think that's one of the reasons MSNBC has become so successful in the last few months. There's an interest in voices outside of the kind of beltway, so that's good.
Do you think we're opposition media, or do you think we're elite media when you think about MSNBC?
You have a dual role because you're connected to NBC, which of course is one of the mainstream institutions, but MSNBC's brand is to be out there as a left-wing network, and I think that's one of the reasons it's doing well, because it's not selling people a false product. When you go on MSNBC, you know you're talking to the left, you know you're talking to hosts who generally lean left. You know, on CNN, there's this idea that they're neutral, that they include all sides, and nobody likes CNN because they know that that's a fraud. They know that what they're getting on CNN is actually a political message dressed up as nonpartisanship. So I am in favor of people wearing their colors on their vests, you know, wearing the uniform and making accuracy the watchword of how you measure journalism rather than impartiality. I have said this before, that the election coverage that MSNBC was doing in 2016 was far and away the best on cable news. I think we were the best overall because we were on top of the Trump phenomenon. But wherever I went, when I was talking to Republican voters, I would see MSNBC correspondents. I would not see correspondents from other networks. And I think once you free yourself of the notion that you're going to be impartial and you tell your viewers, honestly, yes, we have a point of view, but we're going to be objective in terms of our approach to the facts, or I should say we're going to be accurate in our approach to the facts. That frees you to do better journalism. And so MSNBC is often more interesting to watch than the other networks.
So let me, I'll take the compliment, thank you. Although I'm going to get some tweets in a minute from you saying that most of your readers are the same as our viewers. So in the interest of continuing a meaningful dialogue, tell me what
our readers have the same issues as your viewers. They just disagree generally about how to solve them.
Got it. Which is not a problem, right? I mean, it doesn't matter that people disagree with how to solve a problem. What we have in this country is that we're going down a dangerous path, and Charlottesville sort of bared its teeth. That is what we saw. How do we, jointly together with our viewership and your readership, make sure we don't go farther down a path that leads to a race war and violence and people getting killed?
Well, look, I don't think there's any risk of a race war. Look, I'll tell you what I think the real problem in Charlottesville was and remains, by the way. The real problem is that nobody is standing up for the principle of free speech. The First Amendment. You know, I grew up in Skokie, Illinois. I'm Jewish, and Skokie is a Jewish community to the large extent. At the time I was growing up, it had a large number of Holocaust survivors.
And there was a Nazi march through Skokie.
Well, it didn't actually happen because they decided to move it elsewhere, but they won in court the right to march in Skokie. So the Nazi Party was allowed by the courts to march. They eventually changed their plan for other reasons, but the principle that was upheld by the Supreme Court and other court decisions in that case was that the First Amendment protects hateful speech as well. It protects speech you don't like. And the appropriate response to that is to respond with speech and not with violence. You know, I came down very hard on Marco Rubio, a Republican. I consider myself a Republican as well as a conservative. And I came down very hard on Marco Rubio for saying that the white supremacists and Nazis and so forth were 100% in the wrong. And he further said that because their ideas or their ideology was, in his terms, violent, that violence was justified in response. That's completely wrong. If you start saying that ideas are a form of violence, then it doesn't just apply to ideas on the extreme right, but it applies to ideas on the left. It applies to ideas you don't like. Nobody's standing up for freedom of speech. And ironically, the only person who was Donald Trump. But I haven't seen any leaders. All of these guys, or most of them, most of these men and women have law degrees. They all study the Skokie case. Why are they not referring to that? Why are they not referring to any of these things?
And a lot of people, you know, it was hard for a lot of people on the left to accept the fact that the ACLU was defending the rights of these people to march. But let me just go one further, because you said it yourself. You're Jewish. You grew up in a Jewish community. How do you? What's your level of comfort with the fact that the embrace of free speech, as represented by the right, does, to some degree, mean an embrace of neo-Nazis?
Well, I just don't think that it does mean embracing their ideas. I think that it just means embracing their right to demonstrate. I think that I would stand up the same way for them as I would stand up for radical left-wingers at Berkeley, as long as they're not bringing rocks to throw at Milo Yiannopoulos, or as long as they're not rioting and burning things on the campus. I think that you have to stand up. You know, Breitbart has a funny relationship with Bill Maher, the HBO host and comedian, and he was hosted at Berkeley, and they tried to uninvite him, the students, because of his comments on Islam and so forth. And although he's been very harsh toward us, he has said some very nasty things about us, we stood up for him editorially when he was going to be uninvited from Berkeley. So we believe in free speech. Our motto has always been more voices, not fewer voices. And I think that's something Americans can return to when we talk about bringing people back together and avoiding the kind of violence and conflict that you mentioned. I think getting back to the Constitution and the First Amendment is the first step.
So I would say this, my viewers are, I think, and they'll probably tweet me and you in a few minutes if this is incorrect, I think they embrace free speech too. So if we have this common ground that it's about free speech, we have bigger problems to solve once we've passed that by. Do you truly believe that those who are left of center in this country don't believe in free speech?
No, I think most do, but I think our leaders have not articulated that principle, instead of which, I think largely for political reasons, they've said things like these Nazis and white supremacists don't have the right to free speech, or that their speech is a form of violence. We saw that 6 months ago at Berkeley when there was that riot when Milo was there, and there was a series of essays in the Berkeley student newspaper calling violence a form of self-defense against hate speech. Well, we don't accept that in this country. The First Amendment does not exclude hate speech.
Right.
It excludes very few things.
Okay.
And so I think that in the politics of the moment, I think people on the left have been caught up in this, and they are afraid that if they endorse free speech, they're endorsing the views of these Nazis. But there need to be more leaders coming out and saying, we don't like this speech, but they have the right to say this stuff. And you know what? If we just gave them the right to say what they want to say, and we let them do it, we gave them, nobody would listen. This is how they recruit more followers.
I hear your point. I got your point on this. So let me just, I'm going to pull up a group of Breitbart headlines that we've seen recently. Young Muslims in the West are a ticking time bomb, increasingly sympathizing with radicals and terror. Hoisted high and proud, the Confederate flag proclaims a glorious heritage. Bill Kristol, Republican spoiler, renegade Jew. Gay rights have made us dumber. It's time to get back in the closet. Now, no one is challenging that you have the right to publish that on Breitbart. But as a publisher, as a journalist, explain those headlines.
So 3 out of those 4 headlines are written by members of an ethnic or demographic group themselves as a form of criticism or self-criticism. So to take the Muslim headline you put up, that was written by Raheem Kassam, who's our Muslim editor of Breitbart London. The headline you put up about renegade Jew, that was written by David Horowitz, a well-known Jewish conservative. The headline about gays being in the closet was a whimsical essay by Milo Yiannopoulos, who's a gay conservative. And then the 4th headline about the Confederate flag was an opinion piece by a person writing, this is in the wake of the Charleston shooting a couple years ago, writing about how defending the Confederate flag, in his view, is different from defending some of the beliefs and views that are currently associated with that flag. He defended it as a symbol of heritage and a symbol of history,
right, so that,
which is the argument.
Of the 4 headlines,
so that's an opinion.
Right. So I guess the question is the act of wanting to ensure the defense of free speech, does it cause you to have to write things that are insulting and mean and demeaning to particular groups that are identifiable?
No, I think that if you write insulting things just to be insulting, nobody will read them anyway. We wouldn't publish stuff that wasn't on its own thought-provoking, insightful, fact-based, incisive. You know, just to take the Renegade Jew article, which has come up a lot. That was written by David Horowitz to criticize Bill Kristol because Bill Kristol was essentially siding with Hillary Clinton in the election. He didn't want to see Trump elected. And Horowitz was saying, look, if you side with Hillary Clinton is not good for Israel's security, in David Horowitz's view. So you're essentially going against the Jewish community. So he was criticizing Bill Kristol effectively for not being Jewish enough. So it was, there was some thought behind that. It wasn't pointing to his Judaism as a reason not to listen to what he had to say. The article, if you read it, and most people didn't, they just tweeted the headline. If you read the article, it's an argument against Bill Kristol's political position, which was a position shared by a large number of intellectual Jewish conservatives in the Beltway. Now, I don't agree with that argument. I wouldn't make that argument, but that's his opinion piece, and there was nothing anti-Semitic at all about it. And in fact, afterwards, he wrote a follow-up piece saying how shocked he was by the reaction that his headline received because he didn't intend it that way at all.
Joel, I have so much more I want to talk to you about. We've got to get to some other news. Thank you for coming here. I do think we have more to discuss. I'm on TV tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. If you're free, I'll invite you to continue the conversation with me.
As a good Breitbart editor, it's the Jewish Sabbath on Friday night, so I'm offline. But I wish you and your viewers a Shabbat Shalom.
I was just trying to trick you into it. No, Shabbat Shalom to you as well. Joel Pollack is the senior editor at large for Breitbart News. I hope you will come back so we can talk more about this. We do have more to talk about.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.